Tea Talks Tuesday. And as Mayuri said, this is a unique platform, and we are very happy to have you, especially in view of COVID, where everybody is now worried about their children. Now, the word is now out that the third wave is going to affect the children. So the first question is it really is going to affect the third wave? Is it really going to affect children, or children are also part of the third wave, going to be part of third wave? Because we have seen children in first and second wave as well. So
Yeah, I think you already answered the question, ma'am. So children were part of both the first and the second waves. But what is the difference? What's the difference that we observe right from the first, this past 1.5 years is the involvement of children. The percentage of children getting involved is getting higher, and the percentage of symptomatic cases are higher in second wave. And also, to certain extent, hospitalization also increased.
Okay.
The percentage might not have increased, but because the numbers have increased, the involvement, like transmission rate has become more. So out of which, even if like 1% of all COVID cases are children in both the waves, when you take the absolute numbers increasing, so the absolute number of children involved is increasing. The absolute number of children involved in hospitalizing is increasing, in ICUs is increasing. Even then, I would like to re-emphasize that COVID has been kind to children.
Right.
And definitely the involvement is lesser severe. The mortality is less severe when compared to adults. Morbidity is also far, far less severe. But then that should not put us off the guard. And I mean, in the same breath, I would like to say COVID appropriate behavior is mandatory. And if the adults get immunized, if the immunization acceptance and the rates get increased, definitely the transmission will be hindered. And once the transmission is hindered, what happens is the ability to mutate also comes down. It is like having too many copies. The more the copies, the more mistakes you can make. So once the number of copying comes down, the mistakes also come down. It's something like a Xerox machine or something. And once the mutations come down, the looming fear that the new mutations might actually escape the vaccines, or they might be more transmissible, or they might be more virulent, or they might change the pattern of illness. All these things also come down. So we actually, the only thing that we need to do now is to have COVID appropriate behavior and to get immunized. Simple things.
Yeah, very simple things. But on the wake of like unlocking, now we are now unlocking, and then now it is open from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., which means most of our work is done during the day, and in the night, of course, we get back home. And then what prevention need to be taken, especially in relation to children?
So it's always the same. The three things SMS. It's about sanitizing your hands, masking yourself, and also it's about maintaining the social distance, particularly being away from all kinds of avoidable meetings or avoidable congregations. When I say avoidable, essential services, workers in essential services cannot not go to their duty. I mean, the bread earner of the home, if he has to leave to earn the bread, he has to go. Wherever there is a possibility, do online work. But within the constraints. For everyone, it won't be possible. For me, I have to go. So it is something like that. So you have to choose. You have to be more towards preserving yourself at home as much possible, with as much less interaction with the community. So if you're going for grocery or vegetables, try to minimize the number of visits. Doesn't mean you'll hoard for months together, but at least a monthly grocery can be done, and a weekly vegetables can be done, something like that. So avoid as much social or community interaction as possible.
Okay.
And if anyone is, God forbid, gets sick, isolate yourself. That is extremely important. First thing is isolation. And then the rest of the things, were getting treated and following up and all this matter. And one very important thing, particularly for children, is there is any symptom, just contact the doctor online. They will guide you as to what the warning signs are, what day you can expect what, till what day you need to follow up, what are the warning signs, when you have to rush to the hospital, then what are the red flags that you have to immediately discuss with your doctor, what are the blood tests which assess how severe your COVID can get, and then what are the long-term implications, how to take post-COVID care. All these things in a just one consultation you can discuss with your doctor. And what I always emphasize on various platforms is medicine is not like a linear thing like math. It is very variable. It's an interaction between the organism, the host, and the environment also. So each one patient has all different things.
True.
All the three are very variable for any different. So the most important thing, which should be avoided, which is actually taking a toll on some lives, is just copying someone else's prescription, copying someone else's treatment, and not approaching the doctor, sometimes not following up, and sometimes not following up with the visit on the online, not following up with the warning signs, not following up with the medication. All these things, at least I personally think, all the lives lost are about not making use of the healthcare system in the appropriate way, at the appropriate time. The time is extremely important for this disease. There is a 48-hour to 72-hour window during which there is a turn of events that happens from a mild, normal, asymptomatic person to someone who probably cannot be revived. The lapse of this 72 hours is so crucial. Correct medication, correct treatment, and when to get into the hospital, what to do and what not to do. COVID is about, the entire COVID scene is determined by this. Where this is done properly, the outcome is proper, irrespective of the age, sex, race, anything and everything. Where this is not done appropriately, even young people lives are lost. And when it is a very dynamic thing, there are so many things that are different from first wave and second wave.
Right.
The virus has changed itself, and why the second wave came in, there was a large COVID inappropriate behavior with complacence that set in once the test positivity rate has hit its low. And people started behaving like we are over COVID. In spite of getting some like feedback from the rest of the world saying there are more waves happening. So we didn't anticipate this, and most importantly, even if we were to anticipate, had there not been super spreader events, it wouldn't have been this much of a rampage. So that's what it is.
Okay.
Again, it's about mask. Yeah.
Yes, as you said, the 72 hours of window period that we have, but how to find out, I mean, really, because many times, even when we give the RT-PCR test, it is coming negative initially. Only after the symptoms are quite high, then only the RT-PCR is coming positive. So can we, are there any, as you said, red flags or anything, or anything at all? Should we consider it as COVID first and go with that kind of attitude?
Yes.
How we, especially
Yes, yes. A very valid, relevant, and nice question. So the first thing I would like to say is, like I said, there are so many differences between the wave 1 and wave 2. The second wave, actually RT-PCR positivity is only 40 to 50%. We are going by, we are not waiting for the RT-PCR test. The symptoms are suggestive of COVID. We do the inflammatory markers on day 3 to find out how much of an inflammation. If the CRP is very high, ESR is high, and complete picture shows a viral picture with the ferritin going up, RT-PCR still not arrived or RT-PCR negative also with the symptoms correlating, we do treat it like COVID.
Okay.
So what is important? How do we make out that window period when we have to get into the hospital? In adults, actually, what I personally felt is with high inflammatory markers and with symptoms, when you do a 6-minute walk test to check your oxygen saturations. In fact, when you are given a challenge, your latent hypoxia, your ability to become low on oxygen can be unearthed 24 to 48 hours earlier by doing your 6-minute walk test every day. You check your saturation and then keep checking your saturation while walking and also after the walk. 6-minute normal plain ground walk. Okay. So when your oxygen saturations are going down by 3 to 5% before walk to after walk, it is the earliest sign of lung involvement. And if the symptoms are going ahead and the RT-PCR is negative, and your inflammatory markers seem to be getting worse or are significant, then in adults a CT scan can help us to know how severe it is. But this should not be done too early where it will underestimate the disease. So self-testing is not recommended. There is a lot of permutations and combinations for each individual patient. An 80-year-old, I would be more aggressive in investigating and managing. A 30-year-old, I would act with caution. I would not over-investigate, but then I would be cautious. I would like to use clinical parameters more and a little simple lab parameters than go be aggressive with that. A child who's a teenager, I am more receptive to the fact that this child might get complicated. An obese child, yes, I am. A child with pre-existing clinical and serious immunosuppression, like a liver transplant kid or a kidney transplant kid, a neurologically challenged child, someone with a muscle disease, someone who is bedridden, then a special child who cannot tell us warning signs, or all these strata, all this group of children, or a child who's on steroids for his kidney disease, a child who's on chemotherapy for a malignancy. These children, I will have a low threshold to hospitalize. I will have a low threshold to investigate. I will have a low threshold to treat also with specific treatment. Okay. So it is so very individualistic. So that's the reason why, I want to plead on this platform for all parents and for all adults to seek medical help early, even when you think you're looking fine, even when you think you're all asymptomatic, because this is the time you need to know what are the warning signs and when to go back to your doctor. This simple thing is going to save so many lives. Don't be complacent. Same time, you don't have to panic. You don't have to get into panic attacks, but then don't be complacent too, because COVID definitely is a killer if it is not managed properly. That thing is important. If not managed properly at the proper time, proper medication with under guidance of a proper physician or a pediatrician. And this whole scare about black fungus and all those in COVID. So I would like to add a point on this. We used as many steroids. We used as much oxygen, in fact, more during the first wave. But then there was not this much of black fungus. So what people have to understand is, as the virus is changing itself, this ability to meddle with our body and also suppress the antifungal immunity is also one propounded theory.
Okay.
So like I said, any disease and every disease is different with different people. And in the same person, it might be different in 2 different episodes. It's because there are dynamic things. The host is also being modulated by the parasite or the virus. The virus itself has changed itself. So everything is so dynamic. There's nothing constant about a disease.
Okay.
So many important points you have given, Dr. Sharmila, in this very short discussion. Before we go to the next question, audience who are watching this can keep posting your questions on FB, or you can unmute, who are on Zoom can unmute and ask straight to with Dr. Sharmila. So you can do that if you want right now. So next question, yeah. Somebody is there?
I have a question, doctor.
Yeah.
Like Dr. Sharmila, you said that, the 48 to 72 hours is a crucial time. And this is the time where, even an asymptomatic condition also can be turned. So when a person is an asymptomatic and when their inflammatory markers, everything, obviously we don't go to that level. So how can we identify that? Even without symptoms, and everything, perfectly normal person.
Yeah, for adults, I told you, you have to keep checking your oxygen
saturation
till 14 days. And if there are even mild symptoms or escalation of symptoms, you will have to repeat your inflammatory markers.
Okay.
Oxygen saturation checking is important, particularly the 6-minute walk test. And most of the time, something very insidious, something like an abdominal discomfort.
Okay.
Eyes turning red, particularly in children, if the eyes are turning red and mouth is turning red and there is a slight swelling of the hands and feet, and most of the children cannot tell you they have chest discomfort. They're breathing faster than usual, or they're saying that they have some discomfort, or they're vomiting, 1 or 2 vomitings, which didn't happen previously. This is when we know that they're probably getting into the incomplete inflammatory syndromes, which will have a totally different prognosis. Like unless you treat them on time, that the inflammatory syndromes can even kill children. So fortunately in India, we are not seeing them as much. And very fortunately, most of them are very incomplete inflammatory syndromes where the heart involvement is very less.
Okay.
I did see a couple of them, but all of them we could save because we were suspecting. And the children, most of the times it's happening in slightly older age group where they are actually complaining. And even in the younger age group, you cannot miss, because they'll have prolonged fever, any fever beyond the 4th day. And then abdominal pain, loose motions, vomitings, rashes, red eyes, red mouth, swelling of hands and feet and neck with lymph nodes.
Okay.
All these things are red flags.
Okay.
So any symptom which is getting worse, you just have to go back. Don't self-medicate and sit at home.
Right. And in very first in the talk, you said that COVID has been very kind to the kids. Right. Yeah. So what could be the major reason for this?
That is like the $1 million question, which is yet to be answered.
Okay.
There is certain hypotheses that have been propounded. Something like the ACE receptors, which are the essential things for the virus to get hold of the host, are lesser in number and density in children.
Okay.
But why it started affecting the children in the second wave more is because of the same reason. The viral mutation enabled it to gain entry into the host, even when the ACE receptor density is not much. So this is one of the advantages it attained in the mutation. Okay. The transmissibility being increasing also happened because of the very same reason. Okay. And the other thing is, children have a very robust innate immunity, right, and very weak hyperimmune responses that we see in adults. So both ways they're saved. The right. Initial innate immune response is not allowing the virus to colonize in them. And because they're not unduly responding with high inflammatory cytokine storm, right, they're not getting into the serious immune damage that adults go through. Okay. But these inflammatory syndromes that are happening, incomplete and the proper multi-system inflammatory syndrome, which happens 1 month, usually the classic description is 4 to 6 weeks after the presumed COVID infection or the symptomatic COVID infection. But I am saying that this is happening even after, say, 8 days to 4 weeks or something like that. So the inflammatory syndrome and the COVID infection itself is merging in some children. So these are interesting things that we are seeing in the Indian scenario. I'm not sure how the Western experiences are. I did have a chat with my Australian counterpart when we had a case presentation last week, and she told me that they're not seeing inflammatory syndromes at all in Sydney. So they were actually very excited about the cases that we presented. I mean, there was a child whose heart was involved, almost with 30% heart function. She landed up in emergency. I have to confess that I had no hope, but then I'm also happy to say that she went home.
Wow.
Super.
Wow.
Yeah. So the key is, I mean, here actually I was very distressed because they came in very late. So I tried to find out where the loopholes are to correct them.
Okay.
But if on time we recognize them, we can treat 100% everyone.
Right.
So the key is to recognize. So when your child is having a lot of undue abdominal pain or chest discomfort or complete fatigue, complete refusal of food, lot of diarrhea, red mouth and ulcers and all this, you should actually check with your doctor. Not every one of these red flags is actually multi-system inflammatory syndrome, but then you will not know how to differentiate that. So leave it to the doctor. And a couple of simple blood tests which are available in the remotest of the places can actually save lives.
Okay. Okay.
So,
Go ahead, doctor.
Any questions?
Yeah, about masks, I wanted to actually tell one thing.
Yes.
There are a lot of questions that I keep getting about, I mean, we are not able to mask our children, and you yourself are saying, don't mask children below 5 years. And you are saying COVID appropriate behavior is masking. So what do we do about it?
Right.
So I actually reiterate this, that you should not be masking children below 2 years. It is dangerous and they can get into some accidents or low oxygen. 2 to 5 years under supervision, yes. And even after 5 years to 10 years, there should be someone always guiding them. Greater than 10-year-olds with masks, it's quite safe. So this is about the masks that I want to say. And double masking when you go into public places is more protective when it is not an N95 mask, which we don't recommend for everyone. Okay. So double masking is protective. 2 cloth masks or 1 surgical mask and 1 cloth mask when you go for your grocery in a closed environment. The open environments are always safer. You do all your meetings or anything and everything in open areas. And one more thing I wanted to address to all the parents on behalf of my my dear children and out there, I want to champion their cause and tell them, don't actually restrict them indoors all the time. It's quite safe, even in the peak of the pandemic, to go down your apartment complex or anywhere into open areas, maintaining a safe distance with mask, communicate, look at each other, look at the sun, breathe in some good air. Right. Let the children just walk around, run around. Don't restrict all that. I see a lot of children being restricted, and there is a phenomenal increase in anxiety, depression, psychological issues in children thanks to this behavior. And also, I want parents to insist that children make video calls to their friends, have Zoom meetings with a group of friends, and please don't be breathing down their neck 24 hours a day, giving them very tight schedules. It is humanly impossible. Neither are we doing it, neither should they be doing that. Be a little compassionate. Do have a routine, but then the routine should actually be established after negotiating with your children who are older than 10 years. And be kind to all of your children. They don't stick to that. It's not like a robo operating that on time. Are we doing it? No. And I have to put in one word that all these days, I mean, the parents are complaining, oh my God, 24 hours I have my spouse at home and my children at home. But do you imagine that your children are also very, very frustrated? You are actually the boss of the house. You call the shots. But poor children have no say most of the times. They're constantly battling for their rights. Previously, they used to go to school where they would meet peer group and they would have some fresh air away from the parents. It is stressful to live with parents 24 hours. It's not just stressful for the parents to live with the children. It's as stressful or even more stressful for the kids to live with their parents 24 hours under scrutiny. No human being can take that. So be more compassionate towards your children.
Underline
there was
that word.
Yeah,
Under
Simi.
scrutiny.
It's very difficult to live under scrutiny.
Very informative session, Dr. Sharmila. Just wanted to share a recent incident that is there in the family. Is someone was just got fever for a day. So the doctor couldn't identify whether it was a viral or whether it was a COVID. And the RT-PCR report, as you said, only 40% is coming positive. It was coming negative. So twice getting the RT-PCR done, it was coming negative. So because my family, there are a lot of doctors, so we interact with one another. So luckily, we just got the blood parameters checked of the person. And we found out that the D-dimer on the 4th day was about 1,000. So now for a layman person, because it's the new virus that is mutating, so it's not going to come in the RT-PCR reports ahead. So how do we create an awareness among people to at least on the 3rd or the 4th day to get their which parameters need to be checked and what should they do? Because a layman would not have so many guidance from people. It was a family of doctors, we tend to get the test done even unnecessarily. So it was lucky enough that we started with heparin very quickly. It's just a recent thing with my brother. So just wanted to ask that how do we educate the layman people around us with the new virus that's going to come into the mutation or has already come?
Yeah, very nice question. See, the thing is, this is exactly the reason why we keep advocating any fever, anything. In fact, I started telling everyone, every fever is COVID unless proved otherwise. So we first have to check that. We have a difficult, tough time convincing parents to get the RT-PCR done for the child for every fever. But then we tell them that unless we know what we are dealing with, how can we do all the necessary next things? How do we monitor the child? How do we isolate the child? How do we tell them that this child now is COVID positive? So a month later, they might be heading towards an inflammatory syndrome. So it is very important that you take one consultation with the doctor. Most of the doctors are aware right now that RT-PCR is only 40 to 50% positive, and that you need to do the inflammatory markers depending on the signs and symptoms, and particularly, like I told you, the higher age group, wherein anticoagulation, there are only 3 things that are life-saving in COVID as of now, and those are steroids, anticoagulants, and oxygen in various forms. So having said this, the anticoagulation is one of the mainstays of treatment in older age group, not for the children as of now, but definitely for the adults. And when in the children, actually, surprisingly, the D-dimers are not correlating with most of the things. We are using more of complete blood picture, ESR, CRP, serum ferritin in conjunction with D-dimers and the symptoms. So every single person who has any of these symptoms, fever, cold, cough, vomitings, diarrhea, abdominal pain, headache, body aches, and red eyes, all these things, they have to go to the doctor, they have to approach, take an online consult, get your RT-PCR done, also do the inflammatory markers depending on the symptoms. Your doctors are going to guide you at which day, what to do, what not to do. So sometimes when the suspicion is too high and the inflammatory markers are also plus minus, and there is slight reappearance of a symptom or appearance of cough or something, then we go in for the CT scan. So there are, like I told you, it's a very individualistically, what I have to say, it's very customized to each individual patient.
Personalized.
When to do what, yeah.
Yeah.
So you have to approach the doctor. That's the only thumb rule.
Yeah,
Whatever.
to find out what exactly is happening.
Yeah.
Any difference between a normal kid having the COVID and a child with asthmatic history or bronchial allergy?
Yeah.
Because
so
that's the main target organ first.
So there are some very interesting and conflicting observations about about asthma and COVID. So there is one interesting find that they've made out, which actually led to a newer strategy in treating them also. The thing is, they've observed that unlike what we expected, asthmatic kids, because they already have a chronic lung ailment, they expected the asthmatic kids to have more incidence of COVID because their general lung immunity or the respiratory immunity might be lowered because they have additional secretions and they have a bronchospasm where their airways are closer. They react easily to a virus or any kind of allergy. So they anticipated that COVID is going to be more severe in this. But contrary to that, they observed that actually asthmatic kids who are on Budecort nebulization for prophylaxis, for preventive therapy, they observed that COVID is less severe, is less in incidence in these children. Then they started investigating why, and they found out that Budecort is an anti-inflammatory thing. It's a local anti-inflammatory medication that is actually not allowing these children to have the cytokine or the inflammatory storm, and which is actually preventing. That is when they started including Budecort nebulization in some protocols for treating also.
Yeah.
So, but that you have to know when to start the nebulization, when to end it, and in which kind of children it should be given and which should not be. Asthmatic children, the other challenge is that an asthmatic child contracts COVID, there will be an overlapping of the signs and symptoms and even the lab values, because the inflammation will per se be due to the asthmatic attack, which will be triggered by the COVID virus. It will also be because of the COVID virus, and the bronchospasm will set in early. So we have to be more cautious, a little more aggressive in treating that children with early bronchodilators, early hospitalization, a very a very keen eye to pick up low oxygen early. Everything will be there will be a low threshold to treat such a child. And there's one more question that I have seen, that in immunosuppressed children, what is the special care? There's no special care. You just have to be more cautious with not with mingling with the community, because you're immunosuppressed, which you would do even pre-COVID also. Unnecessary mingling should not be done. Masking is very essential. 2 masks when you're stepping out of the house. And because these immunosuppressed children, the signs will be very subtle because of they're already on immunosuppression. The symptoms like fever, while on steroids, your fevers are not too high because you're already on an anti-inflammatory. So even subtle signs should be reported early, and you have to take help of the labs more than in a child who's with a normal immune system.
Okay.
And we treat at a low threshold. We give remdesivir and hospitalization at a low threshold.
Okay. One question on Facebook, they are asking, what are the post-COVID symptoms that can be seen in children?
Yeah, post-COVID symptoms, I have seen children complaining of sleeplessness. They become anorexic. Some of them become anxious. They're depressed. Then there is a prolonged cough that can happen. Some of them are having stomach upset for a long time. They're complaining of being gassy and abdominal pain, not being able to eat too much, burping a lot, all these things. And actually, I've seen a couple of children complaining of new onset of migraine, headaches, and headaches getting worse in children with already previous migraine things immediately post. And one very unpleasant thing that's happening is, which we have seen in the adults also, in children also, there is now a higher incidence of diabetes suddenly in people afflicted with COVID. It's not just diabetics with COVID getting complicated. It's actually de novo. They are turning diabetic during their first time in COVID infection. Both in children who are, there is an increased incidence of admissions for diabetic ketoacidosis since the COVID has come in. So is it linked to the islet cell damage that's happening because of the COVID virus? We still have yet to talk. I have first-hand reports of children having impaired glucose tolerance, like high sugars, who never had diabetes in the past during a COVID infection. I've seen one child having acute pancreatitis secondary to COVID. Pancreas is the place where we secrete our insulin from.
Right.
So we have yet to know, maybe we have to do more retrospective studies about how many are turning diabetic and all these things. So how to recover, get recovered and all those. And added to that, steroid therapy also will make your glucose go intolerant during the therapy. So for how long you need to take steroids and how to taper them off, is a short course enough? All these have to be decided by a qualified person. Much to my anguish, I've seen even kids being self-medicated at home by the parents with drugs which are like, which are not to be done, like oral steroids. And then they complain black fungus is on the rise and all that. So you do not know how much to give, when to give, when not to give, when to stop, when not to stop. All these have to be taken by, see, even the medical personnel, we are learning every day. Every week, I'm learning something new about COVID. I keep reading a lot. And believe me, every single person, every single patient that I see teaches me one more new thing.
Right.
Particularly with COVID.
With COVID, every day is a new day.
And I hear patients complaining, do you actually know what you're talking? Because you are the same person who told me about a month ago to do something else, and now you're talking something else. So am I talking to a qualified person? Am I talking to someone who knows what he's talking? So I keep telling on every platform that we are trying to help you. So we are updating ourselves. The guidelines are changing.
Correct.
The therapies are changing. Now, actually, I have some good news for all the viewers out there. The antibody cocktail, which is used for Donald Trump, the Regeneron, which actually is now available, is showing great promise in mild cases by letting the cases not get into moderate and severe forms. So definitely that's a boon. And the 2DG medication, which is still under trials, I have first-hand anecdotal reports wherein it did decrease the oxygen demand in a patient who's there on oxygen. So we have hope around the corner, but the biggest hope at the moment still is the vaccine.
Everybody has to be vaccinated. And also we have to follow the SMS.
Yes. COVID appropriate behavior, we are going to live with it for a long time to come.
Yeah, true. It's going to be part of our lives. Now, these post-COVID children affected with diabetes, are they treated with insulin or oral hypoglycemic drugs?
Depends on how bad it is. Most of them are only slightly glucose intolerant. While in the ICU, we do treat them with insulin. But then post-discharge, if their glucose stabilizes, they don't have to go in for insulin, which is the case most of the times.
So
and post-COVID one.
Yes.
Post-COVID, one more thing I forgot to tell is like 4 weeks post-COVID, if the symptoms are coming back with the fever, red eyes, whatever I told you of the inflammation, red eyes, red mouth, swelling of neck, hands, feet, and abdominal pain and diarrhea, we had COVID. So this is not COVID, is what some people are thinking, and this might be a stomach infection. No, this could be that very serious inflammatory syndrome. Don't sit, just because you had COVID, doesn't mean anything. Yes, most of the times you are immune for 2 to 3 months, but I have seen COVID afflicting the same child twice in a matter of 2 months.
Okay.
I've seen children also getting there. I've seen adults also getting it twice. I've seen adults getting it after the first dose of immunization, but then that doesn't mean you shouldn't get immunized. Definitely the vaccine is working. I've hardly heard or seen anyone getting hospitalized after the second dose, 2 weeks after the second dose, if you are afflicted. Means you're not exposed before you developed your peak immunity. Most of the times it is only touching you and leaving you with a mild disease, which is what the vaccine is meant to do. It's not meant to prevent the infection. It is meant to prevent severe and serious disease.
Right. So we have another question, ma'am. How can post-COVID anorexia be treated?
You just have to give time to your child. Give some multivitamins.
That's okay.
You just have to give time to your child. Give some multivitamins. Encourage them to eat a lot of fresh fruit and vegetables. Most importantly, go back to little permitted physical exercise. Reach out to our sun god. Have some sunlight. There are children who are depressed post-viral. It's not just with COVID. Even other viral infection, there is what is called post-viral depression. So that is when they get cranky, their behavior changes, and parents are very eager to feed them. They want to just compensate all the lost weight within no time. It's like a race for them. But you have to allow the children to come back to their element very slowly. Just like I always tell, children are only miniature human beings. They're not aliens. So whenever a child is going through a particular issue, just imagine yourself in their shoes and you will get the answer. I've seen parents, the commonest complaint that I hear when parents come to my office with a sick child is the child is refusing to eat. What else do you expect? Do you sit and eat biryani when you are unwell? You're not eating, and so will your child also. Just imagine yourself in your own shoes. Like go into their perspective. You don't have to eat because your activity is not the same. What your body needs is only hydration. Just let them drink water. Give them interesting homemade fluids. And the most important thing is be a little compassionate. Don't show all your frustration of not being able to feed them onto the child, force him, coax him, abuse him. I would call that abuse because they're constantly battering them with food and these sly remarks saying, oh, you haven't eaten. And because you haven't eaten, you felt sick. And now you're not eating, so you won't recover. See, this is a constant mental abuse. Like, be compassionate, offer them food, and be a little, a little tough on fluids. You tell them you have to drink at least water because you have to be peeing a lot. In illness, what is more important is, even for the medication to take effect, it's the hydration of the body. Many a time we admit children only to hydrate them.
Okay.
So the emphasis should not be on food. The emphasis should be on fluid.
Right.
Give them time and I keep telling all the parents that no species ever on this earth has come into being wanting to get extinct or wanting to die. All of us come into being wanting to survive. And food is the most important thing to survive. So you're not gaining anything by coaxing them. That's a survival instinct. They will come to you. Give them time. Just keep seeing if this anorexia is because of an illness which is not preventing them to feel hungry. Is there something ominous going on? And for that, give them a 3-week period from illness or even otherwise. Actually, I'm so passionate about this force feeding that I made a video on iDream Health about food
Okay.
fussiness.
Okay.
Okay.
I
You
know
watch.
of children who are being beaten up for not eating.
Of
So
course,
that
yeah.
made me make that video. That's child abuse.
Right.
Definitely, that is child abuse. Beating to making them
Children.
to eat food.
Eat.
That's not
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, dietitian. You are the better people. You're more qualified and things to talk about food, I think.
I do one program on children on a daily basis in ETV Abhiruchi. It is called
Yeah.
Gorukudalu. So
Uh-huh.
I keep telling the same what you said right now. So don't force, don't force children to eat. When they are hungry, they'll come back to you. And when they don't like it, they say they don't like it. That's all.
That's
That's it. So it's really interesting. So many interesting points. So many interesting points. Every sentence Dr. Sharmila spoke is of a lot of importance to children and adults otherwise also. Any more questions if anybody has?
I don't see any questions on the social media or anywhere. So one question again regards to the vaccination, doctor.
Yes.
Vaccination for kids.
Yeah,
When
yeah,
it is going to come, how it is, what it is.
Yeah. Actually, the vaccines, there are already being given in US and a couple of other countries where Pfizer is in place, and Pfizer is approved for children greater than 12 years.
Right.
All the children are being vaccinated because they want them to go back to school. And Moderna is going to come up with a 1-dose vaccine, and trials are underway from 6-month age group onwards.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
So, and
Okay.
our own Covaxin, which is going to be very relevant for our setups, the trials have started on children greater than 2 years
Okay.
upwards.
Okay.
So once we expect the trial reports to be out maybe by the end of this year, maybe around September, October. But the $1 million question is how many doses will be available and when are we going to vaccinate the children? That I think realistic thing we will not be vaccinating them for the next 1 year too, because we don't have so many vaccines. There are more priority groups. But then once the approval is there, we can actually suggest high-risk children to be immunized.
Okay. Okay.
So at least we can protect certain children. So that's not too far away.
Okay.
And yeah, that's what it is. And I want to, I mean, if it reaches anyone, if there is someone who's out there in the audience who has a power to stop children from going to schools, I mean, my personal opinion is that this year we should not be venturing into offline teaching.
Yeah.
I think we should, even if it is having a lot of psychological impact and still whatever, we should wait and take cautious steps before we open our schools and educational institutions, because that's the lesson we learned from the rest of the world. So we better take lesson.
Okay.
And the onset of the third wave is something around September, October is the, that is what's being said. So is that the time or?
No, I mean, they say actually whenever the test positivity rate goes down, it will be 2 to 3 months later. Okay. So from June, if it's 2 to 3 months later, it will be somewhere around July, August, and September. But then everything is dependent on human behavior.
Right.
If it is too much mingling, see what happens is the people who are afflicted with COVID in the last wave, they have an immunity till 2 to 3 months. So there's a little lull, because there are people who are immune, more people who are immune than non-immune. So once this thing goes down, the guard goes down. But then if there is too much mingling of non-immune population,
right,
then the outbreak might be earlier. The outbreak might be more severe.
Right.
And if mingling is too much and super spreader events like those, what happened before, like the election rallies or religious congregations or unnecessary,
marriages,
things going on, then marriages, even now, yesterday also I've seen people coming from a marriage with COVID affliction. So if those things happen, particularly death ceremonies, first wave I've seen so many people going to death ceremonies and then coming into the hospital.
True.
So many. So I think now we have to be cautious. So that's what it is. And unless each one of us is cautious and our own neighbors are cautious, our health is not assured. I think COVID taught us something, that we cannot live in isolation. We cannot not be affected by our neighbor. So you have to love thy neighbor.
Love the neighbor.
Neighbor. True, very true.
Take care of them, and only then you are safe.
Safe.
We are
About
all in a
community.
fabric, knitted
Yes.
together.
Yeah.
Right.
So, Dr. Sharmila, please give us a few points, like, take home, like, these
Take
are
home
the,
message.
these
Yes.
are the salient messages that each parent has to abide by.
Yeah.
Like 10 commandments or whatever, 5
Like it.
commandments.
Yeah. So there are 4 important things to prevent the third wave or to be safe. Those are very simple.
You're unmute.
Anyone and everyone who has an access to vaccine, no vaccine hesitancy and no preference for a particular brand, please go ahead and take your vaccine. That is number 1. And in spite of being immunized, fully immunized, don't forget, mask is a part of your life for years to come. Masking is compulsory even in fully immunized people and greater than 5-year-old children. Sanitizing your hands is also essential. And definitely the social congregations are going to be the super spreaders, are going to determine whether we are going to have more waves or not. So this is COVID appropriate behavior. And in addition to that, don't get paranoid. With the mask, let the children go down, have good sunlight. Do not use too much zinc rich preparations for a long time, because zinc is known to feed the fungus.
Okay.
Just like iron preparations, when you are having fever, you should not be taking iron preparations because it will strengthen your germs. High doses of zinc, not the ones in the multivitamin preparations, but there are pure zinc preparations which people are popping. Don't do that, because any vitamin preparation has to be only under supervision of a physician or a pediatrician. Don't pop your own pills and then repent later. So don't use WhatsApp forwards. Take one consultation. It doesn't cost you. It's not more costly than your life.
Yes.
Yeah. So these are the take-home things. And don't be afraid. Children are doing quite well in COVID. And adults also, we can help you 100% if you take advice. That is the key. COVID is not a killer as long as you are alert.
Right.
It's a killer only when you are complicit.
Okay.
That's what it is.
Okay.
Yeah. This, I think.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Thank you so much for all the wonderful words and the very interesting session, actually. And you have covered almost every point which is needed for all the people to know, and everything. Anything from your side, Dr. Janaki?
No, one more question. I was when we say fully vaccinated, that is 2 doses or single dose, based on the type of vaccine. For how long that will be effective? I mean, it may not be effective for all variants, but then still, whatever.
This is one fear that has been that's lurking in everyone's mind. Will vaccination really protect us from all the variants right now? As of now, the information still says it is protective. When I say protective, like I said, protective against severe disease, that I'm very sure. There are so many studies. And the other thing is, how long is this vaccine going to protect me? That is the question that we cannot answer at the moment. But minimum of 6-month immunity is assured. Okay. Right now, they're doing retrospective studies again on people who are vaccinated, their immune level and all these things. But like I said, even if you're immunized, you are going to mask yourself.
Correct. Of course.
That is very, very important. Not only will you get infected, you're capable of infecting others also. You might be carrying the virus in your nose, you're asymptomatic because you're immunized, but then you are giving this virus to someone else when you're sneezing or coughing. So having a mask is protecting you, protecting the community. And believe me, I'm saying this again and again, unless the community is protected, you're not protected. You're immunized now, but if the community is not protected, you are going to be non-immune in a couple of months.
Right.
And this is going to come back to you. And if the community is not immune, it is allowing for more lethal mutations to come in.
Correct.
So you cannot have good health unless you care for your neighbor and everyone else. So you have to be COVID appropriate. That's all.
So new norms of behavior we have to know, like, we have to put in etiquette, new norms of etiquette also.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Okay. So if somebody has got recovered from COVID, they will have 3 months time to get back to normalcy, in the sense to have another episode of COVID. And if they're vaccinated, they have 6 months time.
Yeah. Actually, they found out one interesting thing. Just now I was reading that paper. It is like this: the person who is afflicted with COVID and then takes one more dose, actually, what the one dose is giving them far higher immunity than people who never got afflicted with COVID. So COVID infection is acting like a very good booster for this. So it is, the body is remembering the infection in the memory T cells, and it is actually boosting itself up with just with one dose. So this is a newer finding that they found out. So don't get worried, get vaccinated. Even for people who had COVID, have to take vaccine, because it's not a natural infection, is not going to give you lifelong immunity. It definitely is going to give you a little bit more edge, but definitely not protective. You have to get vaccinated.
Right, as you said, doctor, like it's like for 6 months, then post 6 months, any other dose it's going to come, or
right
like
now, that's still under consideration, whether we have to take an yearly dose or a booster 6 months later, or is it going to be once in 5 years. All these things are yet to be found out. Right now we are struggling to give the first doses itself.
True.
So that's all very far for us.
Right. But there is we might have another booster dose or something.
It might become something like a flu vaccine, which we go in for yearly thing. And one more thing, there are a lot of questions coming up about flu vaccine, saying, is flu vaccine protective against COVID? No, it's not protective, but there is a reason why you should go for flu vaccine during this time. Two things. One thing is, in a very small study, there is a doubt if flu vaccine might give a little cross protection, in the sense, will COVID become less severe in such children who are immunized against flu, children or adults. The other thing is, at least if you prevent flu by taking a flu vaccine, you're not confused about whether that infection, particular one, when it happens, is it COVID or flu or something like that. So flu vaccination is mandatory. You should go in for flu vaccination, all of you. Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. So I think we are done.
We are done almost.
Thank you.
So like in America, we have to go for flu shots every year.
Yes.
Okay. So thank you so much, Dr. Sharmila, for giving us such a valuable information. Really, it's an insight. So many things we learned today. Number one is, like, 48 hours before only we get some signs or clues for children, and we need to be cautious to so that the mutation gets reduced. That is COVID appropriate behavior. Everybody has to follow it. That's one point. How each one of us can reduce mutation is contribute is to follow the COVID appropriate behavior. We have to look at the telltale marks of inflammation, like red eyes, red mouth, and vomitings or swelling amongst the children.
Diarrhea, abdominal pain, headaches,
headaches and all. And the CBP and inflammatory markers are the first line of test for children, especially. And vaccination is one important thing. And also you have given one important point, whether how to mask children. Less than 2 years, we cannot mask them, and more 2 years to 10 years, we have to they have to be under our guidance, the parents' guidance. So that's very, very important point. So thank you so much for coming over and giving us very valuable.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Every platform actually teaches me a lot, and I'm enriched interacting with you both.
Same here. Thank you so much, Dr. Sharmila.
Welcome.
We would like to see you again in some time.
Sure.
Maybe after, maybe if third wave comes, then we have to do it again. Maybe.
Yeah. Hopefully
more information.
You won't. Yeah. So hopefully you won't need me for the third wave. Hopefully you'll need me for something more pleasant and interactive. Let's
always.
see. But if needed, I'm always there. If needed, I'm always there. It's a pleasure to be of some help. It's actually a joy. It's actually a joy to know that you're making a difference somewhere in someone's life. It's a joy.
Yes. Thank you so much, Doctor. Thank you so much for being on Tea Talks. Okay. See you all next Tuesday, same time, same place. Bye for today.